Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of the Rekindling the Legacy podcast. I am Professor Andrew Davis.
And I'm Dr. Juhi Gupta, and together we are here to retell the stories of some of the heroic women who fought for their freedom against all the odds and made India the nation it is today.
This podcast is produced by the Inclusive Futures Foundation. We are an NGO based in India that works around women and children's rights. We work on education and healthcare, environmental concerns, and cultural issues. And this podcast is one of the important projects that we do to promote understanding of Indian culture. You can find out more about that on our website, theinclusivefuturesfoundation.com. Do give it a visit when you've got a moment.
First, we want to thank you for joining us on what we hope will be another inspirational journey through the lives and experiences of some of the underestimated and often unacknowledged pioneering women who shaped Indian history. Today, we want to tell you about a woman who lived one of the most fascinating double lives in the history of India's independence movement. Picture this. By day, she is a devoted follower of Mahatma Gandhi, preaching non-violence and peaceful resistance. But by night, she is smuggling weapons to revolutionaries and helping plan one of the most audacious train robberies in Indian history. Her name was Rajkumari Gupta, and her story is about the impossible choices people make when they are fighting for freedom.
What makes Rajkumari's story so compelling is that she represents this incredible internal conflict that many Indians faced during the freedom struggle. Do you follow Gandhi's path of non-violence, or do you pick up arms against the oppressor? For most people, it was an either-or choice, but Rajkumari chose both pathways. Let's start with her beginnings. Rajkumari was born in 1902, the daughter of a grocer in the Banda district of what's now Uttar Pradesh. Her family was traditional middle class for the time. Her mother was a homemaker who followed the Purdah system, staying within the confines of domestic life, as was expected of women at that time.
And like so many women of her era, Rajkumari was married incredibly early. At just 13 years old, she was married to Sri Madan Mohan Gupta. But here's where her story takes an interesting turn. Her husband wasn't just an ordinary man. He was a revolutionary and a Congress activist, someone who was already deeply involved in the fight against British rule. Now, in most cases, a young bride married into a traditional family would be expected to settle into domestic life, to stay within what she later called the four walls of the kitchen. But Rajkumari was different. Instead of being confined by marriage, it became her gateway to the independence movement.
And that's because both Rajkumari and her husband were deeply influenced by Mahatma Gandhi. This was the 1920s, the era when Gandhi was propagating his theory of ahimsa, non-violence, and his policy of mass satyagraha was attracting people across India. Rajkumari and Madan Mohan become devoted followers of Gandhian principles. But then something happened that would change the course of Rajkumari's life forever. On February the 4th, 1922, during the rise of the non-cooperation movement, protesters in a place called Chori Chora set fire to a police station and killed more than 22 police officers. This violence was completely against Gandhi's core principles of non-violence, and his response to the situation was immediate and, to many people, devastating. Gandhi called off the entire non-cooperation movement, just like that. This massive nationwide protest that had been building momentum for change was stopped because of one violent incident.
Now imagine you're a young woman who has just been awakening to political consciousness, who believes passionately in freedom for your country, and suddenly the leader you have been following says, "Stop, we are calling everything off because some people became violent? How would you react? For Rajkumari, this was a turning point. She became what she later described as disgruntled with Gandhi's decision. And this disillusionment led her down a very different path towards revolutionary struggle.
This is when she encountered Chandrasekhar Azad, one of the most famous revolutionaries of the independence movement. Azad visited Banda, spread his revolutionary ideas, and gained tremendous support there. And Rajkumari was inspired by him and established strong connections with this organisation, the Hindustan Republican Association, or the HRA. But here's where Rajkumari's story becomes really fascinating. From that moment on, she began living a complete double life. Externally, to all intents and purposes, she remained fully a Gandhian. To her family, to her community, she was still this devoted follower of the principle of non-violence. But secretly, she was delivering messages and equipment to revolutionaries. She kept her revolutionary activities completely private, even from her own family and husband. Can you imagine the psychological strain of living such a divided existence? By day, preaching peace and ahimsa, by night, supporting armed revolution.
And this double life led her to play a key role in one of the most famous revolutionary acts in Indian history, the Kakori conspiracy. On August 9th, 1925, members of the Hindustan Republican Association robbed a train near Kakori, which is just outside Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh. This wasn't just any robbery. It was a carefully planned operation to acquire money and weapons for revolutionary activities against the British. And Rajkumari's role in this operation was both crucial and incredibly dangerous. She was responsible for delivering firearms to her comrades. But how do you transport illegal weapons when the British police are everywhere and anyone could be searched at any moment?
Rajkumari went with the ingenious solution of hiding the firearms in her undergarments. Think about the courage that would have required. She was walking around with weapons literally strapped to her body, knowing that if she was caught, she would face years in prison, if not worse. But she makes this disguise even more convincing. She wears khadi clothes and carries her 3-year-old son with her. Who would suspect a young mother carrying her child of smuggling weapons to revolutionaries? It was the perfect disguise, and it worked. Her successful delivery of weapons helped make the Kakori robbery one of the most significant revolutionary acts of the independence movement. The organisation sent a clear message that the revolutionaries were organised, well armed, and willing to take direct action against British rule.
But living a double life like this couldn't last forever. In 1930, Rajkumari was arrested for her revolutionary activities and her connections with the HRA. And this is where her story takes a heartbreaking turn. When news of her arrest and her revolutionary activities became public, her own family disowned her. Her in-laws were so ashamed and frightened by her actions that they actually published notices in a local newspaper called Veer Bhagat, officially declaring her that they had no connections, no relationship with her. Imagine that moment. You have sacrificed everything for your country's freedom. You have risked your life countless times. And when you finally got your own family publicly abandons you, most people would be crushed by this kind of rejection.
But not Rajkumari. In later interviews, she showed no regret about her choices. She had a way of explaining her double life that was both poetic and defiant. She said, Hum upar se Gandhivadi the, niche se Krantivadi the. We were Gandhians from above, but underneath we were revolutionaries. This quote captures something profound about the complexity of the independence movement. It wasn't just about choosing between Gandhi's non-violence and the revolutionaries' armed struggle. For people like Rajkumari, both approaches were necessary. You could believe in the moral power of non-violence whilst also believing that sometimes more direct military-style action was required.
Rajkumari was arrested and jailed multiple times in 1930, 1932, and 1942. Each time she served her sentence without complaint, viewing her imprisonment as part of her duty to the nation. In one of the interview, when asked about all the sacrifices she had made, the arrest, the imprisonment, being disowned by her own family, she gave a response that perfectly captures her character. She simply said, "Humko jo karna tha, kiya." I did what I had to do. There's something beautifully matter of fact about that response. No dramatics, no self pity, no regret. Just a simple statement. I did what I had to do.
But here's what's tragic about Rajkumari's story. Despite her crucial role in one of the most famous events of the independence movement, she never received proper recognition in Indian history. Only a few historians have pointed out her role in the Kakori conspiracy, and even then they often refer to her simply as the Kakori woman, not even using her name.
As we always like to conclude our biographies by asking and answering this question, that what was her legacy? What are the lessons that we should learn from her? How does her life make any difference? So, Andrew, what would you say about Rajkumari Gupta?
The independence movement in India is often presented as a story of great men and clear moral choices. But Rajkumari's story shows us that the reality on the ground was much more complicated than that. Real people made impossible choices, lived with contradictions, and often paid prices that were never really acknowledged. What I find most remarkable about Rajkumari is how she navigated the philosophical tension at the heart of the independence movement. Gandhi's nonviolence was morally pure, but was it practically effective? Was it going to make a difference on its own? On the other side, the armed struggle of the revolutionaries was much more direct, but did it contradict the very values that they were fighting for? Was it an assault on their own freedom? Rajkumari didn't choose one of these paths over the other, but she chose to pursue both of them. She understood that sometimes you need the moral authority that comes from non-violence, but also sometimes you need the practical effectiveness that comes from direct action. So for her, this double life wasn't about deception. It was about recognizing that the fight for freedom required multiple approaches. She was willing to live with the psychological complexity and the personal cost of embodying both philosophies.
And the personal cost was enormous. She was arrested multiple times, imprisoned for years, and completely rejected by her own family. She sacrificed her relationships, her security, and her place in society for the cause of independence. But she never wavered. Even decades later, when she had every reason to feel bitter about being forgotten by history, she maintained that she had done what needed to be done.
And ultimately, that's the legacy and the best epitaph for Rajkumari Gupta, the grocer's daughter who became a revolutionary, the Gandhi follower who smuggled weapons, the woman who lived a double life in service of a single cause, the freedom of her country. And yet she was rejected by her family, avoided by mainstream history, and abandoned to obscurity, despite that extraordinary contribution to India's freedom.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. So the next time you hear the story of India's independence, remember that it wasn't just won by the famous leaders whose names are in every textbook. It was also won by people like Rajkumari Gupta, people whose names we are only now beginning to learn, whose stories we are only now beginning to tell. and whose sacrifices we are only now beginning to understand.
There's so much more still to learn, so don't miss out on future episodes of this podcast series. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do like it. Please do comment if you want to. But make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next episode as we return to tell the story of another remarkable Indian woman freedom fighter. Thanks for joining us.